Do you have a need for speed? Let's talk 204 Ruger. Guy Miner here from UltimateReloader.com. Today we're talking the 204 Ruger. What we're going to get into is a little bit about the cartridge and about loading for it. I'm going to talk about two bullets that I've used quite a bit over the years. Talk a little bit about one of my favorite rifles. We're going to try a little rock chuck shooting too while we're out here. So the 204 Ruger is a high velocity, low recoil varmint cartridge. It's based on the old 222 Remington Magnum, which is very seldom seen these days. However, the 204 Ruger has gotten really popular among varmint shooters. Uses a range of bullets from down to about 24 up to 45 grains, sometimes higher, but those take a special twist barrel. 4,000 plus feet per second is possible, and sometimes even with factory loads. It's best used for small rodents, things like sage rats, prairie dogs, rock chucks, call them woodchucks other places, and I've even pushed it up to coyotes with no problem. Got my rifle about 15, 16 years ago. It's a CZ 527 varminter. Mine came with a 25-inch barrel. They made them a couple different barrel lengths over the years and a 1-to-12 twist. It has a set trigger, kind of a unique design. I tested the trigger here earlier today. Without being on set trigger, it's at almost 5 pounds. Using the set trigger, 2 ounces. Huge difference. Walnut stock, which I like and appreciate, think it looks good, and I've got my old 4.5 to 14 Leupold on here for a scope, and it's taken me out to pretty good long ranges with this, and I do appreciate being able to turn it down when I'm going to hunt coyotes that may be at closer quarters. Other features about this rifle, it has a detachable magazine, which is real handy. I can put 5 rounds in there, carry the rifle around unloaded, and load it again in just a moment. This action that CZ came up with is sometimes referred to as a micro Mauser action because it's very much similar to a normal Mauser action with that controlled round feed, that big extractor, and yet it's tiny. It's made for 223 size cartridges. Scope mounting, very simple. It's got a couple of 16mm dovetails milled into the top of the receiver, and you can get rings that are made for it. You do have to worry a little bit about the bolt handle because it curves up real close to the scope. Sadly, CZ discontinued production of this rifle last year, but I've got mine. We're going to talk about two bullets that I've used quite a bit in this rifle, and the first one up is going to be the Hornady 40 grain VMAX. Obviously it's 40 grain, 20 caliber, .204. It has a G1BC of .275, which doesn't sound real high, but compared to my other favorite bullet in this cartridge, it's pretty darn high. Required twist for that is a 1-to-12, and there's where we've had a few problems over the years with the 204 Rugers, sometimes not stabilizing those 40 grain bullets because it's right on the edge. And if your twist rate is really not quite 1-to-12, maybe it's 1-to-12.5, that kind of thing happens, you might have a little trouble stabilizing this bullet. I like this bullet particularly if I'm going to be shooting out at longer range. A friend of mine just asked me a while ago how far I had taken the 204 Ruger out to, and at one of our local gun clubs I have target shot with it out at 600. It did pretty good if the wind wasn't too bad. Obviously with this lowish BC and this tiny lightweight, it does get tossed around a little bit in the wind. It is excellent out there on varmints though at 300 plus yards. Let's talk about the load data for this 40 grain Hornady bullet. I used 29 grains of CFE 223. I used a small primer. I used the Federal 205, but the CCI 400 works as well. The cases I used were Hornady cases, and they're just neck sized. That's all I was doing with this particular setup. We found an average of 3,580 feet per second, 20 feet per second standard deviation, and a 51 feet per second extreme spread. Typically, I haven't had quite as accurate results with this bullet at shorter ranges as I have with the other bullet we're going to talk about, but it's plenty good enough to take out some rock chucks. I have done real well with it with that. One of the nice things about the 204 Ruger is its flat trajectory. Makes it real easy to make those hits out at 300 yards just fine. Taking a look at the trajectory figures, if you've got your rifle sighted in at 100 yards, then it's only a couple inches low at 200 and only about 8.5 inches low at 300 yards. That's real easy to compensate for. Also, if you like that point blank range stuff, you can sight this in at a little over 300 yards, 329 yards, and according to the JBM ballistics calculator, it's got a maximum point blank range of 383 yards, and that's a long way for me on a prairie dog. The most accurate bullet that I've used in my 204 is this little Berger 35 grain flat base bullet. Now that flat base is conducive to some good accuracy, but it doesn't give it a very good BC. If you take a look at the BC on this, it's only .179, and that is kind of ridiculously low. But you'll see why we get away with that in just a minute. It stabilizes very nicely in the 1-12 twist barrel. So next, let's talk about load data for the 35 grain Berger. It's a flat base bullet. It's proven really accurate for me over the years. And what I'm using for a powder charge is 30 grains of ball C2 or BLC2 powder. Also using the Federal 205 for most of my loads on this, and again the Hornady neck-sized cases. We saw 3,843 feet per second average velocity the other day when we tested this. My SD and extreme spread were a little higher than I like. The extreme spread was 95 feet per second, which is a bit much, and my SD, standard deviation, was 33 feet per second, which again is a little higher than I like to see on something I'm loading for precision, but normally this bullet produces really good accuracy for me. Again, even with this stubby little bullet, the trajectory is really good because we're starting it out at over 3,800 feet per second. So that's moving right along. We zeroed it at 100. It's only dropped 2 inches at 200 yards and a little less than 9 inches at 300 yards. I can take care of that as a shooter, no problem. It's got good speed all the way out to 300 or 400 yards, plenty good enough for taking down varmints and coyotes. I'd like to tell you about the setup I use for reloading 204 Ruger and a few other cartridges, but here today it's a 204 Ruger. I prefer to neck size that particular cartridge, and I do that on a little arbor press and on Wilson dies. And this is how it works. We're going to take you right through that. Okay. First thing we're going to do is lube the case. This is different from what I do on my other cases. Take a little bit of lube. We're going to put it right up here on the case neck. Only takes a little tiny bit. Can use, this is Hornady, but any of the sizing dye waxes work out real well. We're going to take the sizing and decapping dye, insert the case in there, in this Wilson dye, put it down here, and then the arbor press has now already resized that neck. We're going to flip it back over. We'll hit that stem, 1, 2 steps. The primer is now out. The neck is resized, and we're ready to go on farther. Let's do another one here. Just a little bit of lube down in the sizer die. Resize it, turn it over, decap it, pull it out of the die. It's ready to go. At this point, we'll go ahead and take the sizing lube off of it. Don't need that anymore. I'm going to prime this. Now I'm using Hornady's setup here. And yes, I know that's RCBS green. Hornady includes that with their hand resizing tool in case you have a bunch of RCBS shell holders. There, it's now primed. Good to go. Sits nice and flat, so you know it's seated right. Here comes the other one. Primed, seated flat, good to go. We've now sized, deprimed, reprimed. It's time for some powder. Going to go into the powder here, setting the CFE 223 at 29.0 grains And we are going to get that out. This is that Lyman Gen 6 that I did an article on, several months ago. And I've been using it at home a bit. Thought we'd go ahead and demonstrate it here again. And let's see if it comes out to 28.4. Now it's starting to count down. It should get up to 29. 29 grains and done. Okay. Set it for auto repeat. And we are going to take one of these cases. By the way, if you haven't resized or loaded anything as small as a 20 caliber, you might need a different funnel than normal. So here comes the powder. Gently pour it in there. Let's get the bullet seating die out. Little plate down there on the bottom. One tiny little 40 grain bullet. Down on there. And again with the arbor press, it is seated. There we have a complete cartridge for 204 Ruger. If you use the auto repeat, that could have filled this all up while I was doing the other stuff. I forgot to turn that on. But there's 29 grains on the nose again. Now it's doing it. The advantage of these dies is that they maintain everything perfectly straight. The cartridge case is held in there straight, the case neck is perfectly straight, and the bullet is seated perfectly straight, leading to normally very, very good accuracy. That's how you reload on an arbor press. In conclusion, the 204 Ruger is one zippy little varmint cartridge with a lot of accuracy potential, just does a fine job. Even in a sporter weight rifle, the recoil is so low that my crosshairs stay on target, like on the rock chuck I shot this morning. What we want to know is, are you using a 204 Ruger? If so, what kind of rifle, what kind of loads are you working, and what are you shooting? And if you're not using a 204 Ruger, what kind of varmint cartridge are you using in varmint rifle? Please drop a comment and let's have a discussion. It's time to wrap it up.
I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. Also, make your voice heard. If you have something to say, please drop a comment. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications because you're not going to want to miss the awesome content that is coming up. And finally, flex your reloading pride. You could look great in one of these t-shirts. We've got multiple designs at the Ultimate Reloader store. I'll see you later because I'm off to go shooting.